That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over Fort Harlan, casting long shadows across the gravel parade ground. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention, her boots planted firm in the dust, the weight of her utility uniform a familiar anchor. At her side, Rex, her German Shepherd K9 partner, sat rigid, his black and tan coat gleaming under the early light. The air carried the sharp tang of dew on canvas tents and the faint diesel hum from idling Humvees beyond the wire. Commands echoed from the drill sergeant's throat, crisp and unyielding. "Platoon, attention! Eyes front!" Elena's unit, the 47th Military Police Battalion, was midway through their standard morning formation. It was protocol here. Every day started with accountability, a ritual to reinforce the chain of command that bound them all. As a K9 handler, with 8 years in, Elena knew the rhythm by heart. Her role wasn't glory, it was precision. Rex detected explosives, narcotics, even the subtlest signs of evasion in suspects. Their bond was forged in silence, through countless hours of obedience drills and night patrols along the base perimeter. She'd whisper commands in his ear during downtime, "Sits, gut," and he'd lean into her hand, his dark eyes steady, trusting her as she trusted him to sense threats humans missed. Captain Harlan Reed, the company commander, paced the front line, his polished boots kicking up faint puffs of dirt. A veteran of 2 deployments, Reed embodied the institution's iron spine, broad-shouldered, voice like gravel over radio static. "Vasquez," he barked, halting before her, "report on Rex's certification. We're green for the joint exercise with the MPs next week?" "Yes, sir," Elena replied, her tone level, gaze locked on his chin strap. "Full compliance, scent detection at 98% accuracy. He's ready." Reed nodded curtly, glancing down at Rex. The dog didn't flinch, ears perked, tail still. "Good. Keep him sharp. We don't tolerate lapses." He moved on, inspecting the next handler, but Elena felt the weight of his words linger. The base was a pressure cooker of routine and risk. Fort Harlan sat on the edge of a sprawling civilian town, where military life bled into the ordinary. Off-duty, soldiers like her rented modest homes in the nearby neighborhoods, a fragile bridge between barracks discipline and family ties. As formation broke, the platoon dispersed with muffled boot steps and low murmurs. Elena clipped Rex's leash and led him toward the kennels, a squat row of concrete buildings ringed by chain link. The morning briefing had been straightforward: patrol rotations, equipment checks, and a reminder to secure personal effects. But Elena's mind wandered to her neighbor, Mrs. Lydia Grant, a widow in the house next door. Lydia's son, Tommy, a lanky 12-year-old with a fascination for stray animals, had been playing in the yard the evening before. Elena had waved to him through the fence, Rex sniffing the air curiously. Now, as she unlocked the kennel gate, a distant shout cut through the base's hum. "Help! Someone took him!" The cry pierced the air, raw and frantic, coming from the direction of the civilian access road. Heads turned, soldiers paused mid-stride, hands instinctively dropping to sidearms. Elena froze, Rex's leash taut in her grip. The voice was Lydia's, unmistakable from their shared fence-line chats. She unclipped Rex without thinking, her training kicking in like muscle memory. "Such," she commanded softly. "Search." Rex bolted, nose low to the ground, his paws churning gravel as he veered off base toward the neighborhood. Elena followed at a jog, radio crackling at her hip. "Control, this is Vasquez, responding to civilian distress. K9 deployed." The chain-link gate to the civilian side swung open, and Elena pushed through, the world shifting from military precision to suburban sprawl. Row houses lined the street. American flags fluttering from porches, the scent of fresh-cut grass mixing with exhaust from a passing truck. Lydia stood at her driveway, face pale, hands wringing a dish towel. "Elena, it's Tommy. He was with that old stray dog he feeds, the one by the tracks. Then a van pulled up and they grabbed him, both of them just gone." Eleanor's pulse steadied. She knelt beside Rex, who was already quartering the air, nostrils flaring. "Ma'am, when? Describe the van." 10 minutes ago, maybe less. White, no plates I could see, headed toward the old train tunnel, the abandoned one past the mill." Lydia's voice trembled, but her eyes locked on Rex, hope flickering. Can he find them? Before Elena could respond, Rex whined low, a signal she knew too well, scent acquired. He lunged toward the street, pulling her along the cracked sidewalk. The tunnel loomed in her mind, a relic from the base's rail days, now a shadowed stretch of overgrown weeds and rusted tracks, off-limits to civilians but patrolled sporadically by MPs. Protocol screamed in her head, "Secure the scene, call for backup, do not pursue alone." But Lydia's plea hung heavy, and Rex's determination mirrored her own buried instinct, to act, not deliberate. "Stay here, ma'am," Elena said, voice firm. "I'll radio it in." She keyed her mic. "Control Vasquez. Possible abduction, civilian child, heading to old rail tunnel. Request immediate support. K9 tracking." Affirmative crackled back, but Rex didn't wait. He strained forward, weaving past parked cars. His focus unbreakable. Elena's boots hit pavement, the base's order fading behind her. Neighbors emerged on stoops, whispering, phones already dialing 911. This wasn't a drill, it was chaos bleeding into her world, testing the line between duty and the human pull to protect. As they neared the mill's shadow, the air grew cooler, laced with the metallic tang of rust and damp earth. The tunnel entrance yawned ahead, a black maw framed by graffiti-scarred concrete. Rex slowed, hackles rising, then bolted straight in, vanishing into the dark. Elena hesitated at the threshold, flashlight beam cutting the gloom. Regulations be damned. This was Tommy, the kid who'd once tossed a ball for Rex over the fence. She stepped forward, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the void. Inside, the tunnel's chill wrapped around her, water dripping from cracks overhead. Rex's tags jingled faintly ahead, his silhouette merging with shadows. "Rex! Aus!" Out, but he didn't stop, driven by the scent only he could follow. Elena's radio buzzed. "Vasquez, hold position, back up en route." But holding meant waiting, and waiting might mean too late. In that moment, with the weight of her uniform and the institution's eyes upon her, Elena chose. She pressed on, the beam of her light revealing scuffed dirt and a discarded shoelace. Tommy's, she knew. The defiance settled in her chest, quiet but unyielding. What started as a neighbor's cry was unraveling the rigid lines of her world, forcing a reckoning between orders and the loyalty that bound her not just to Rex, but to the fragile lives beyond the wire. The tunnel's darkness pressed in like a held breath, the air thick with the musty scent of stagnant water and decaying leaves. Elena's flashlight beam danced across uneven walls, illuminating veins of graffiti, faded tags from kids who dared the forbidden stretch years ago. Her boots crunched over loose gravel, each step echoing faintly, measured to avoid alerting anyone ahead. Rex moved with purpose ahead of her, his form a low shadow, nose skimming the ground, pausing only to huff at a fresh disturbance in the dirt. A partial footprint, small and smeared, leading deeper. "Easy, boy," Elena murmured, her voice a controlled whisper, hand hovering near his collar. She could feel the tension in his muscles through the leash she'd reattached at the entrance. Rex wasn't just tracking, he was locked on, his instincts pulling them both into the unknown. Protocol gnawed at her. K9 handlers didn't go solo on pursuits, especially off base. Backup was minutes out, sirens likely stirring the town by now, but every second in here felt like a breach. Lydia's face flashed in her mind, the raw panic in her eyes, the way she'd clutched that dish towel like a lifeline. Tommy wasn't just a neighbor's kid. He was the one who'd shared scraps with Rex during Elena's rare evenings off, bridging her disciplined world with something softer. The radio at her hip crackled softly, volume low to not spook the dog. "Vasquez, this is Control. ETA on support. 5 mics. Confirm position and hold." 5 minutes. In a tunnel like this, it might as well be an hour. Elena keyed the mic briefly. "Copy. Position secured at tunnel mouth. Tracking active." It wasn't a full lie, but close enough to buy time. She wasn't recklessly charging. She was assessing, following the scent line Rex laid out. Her training kicked in. Scan for threats. Note evidence. Maintain composure. But beneath it, the moral pull tightened. Obedience to chain of command versus the immediate duty to a child in peril. Deeper in, the tunnel widened slightly, revealing side alcoves where old rail ties rotted in piles. Rex veered left, whining low, his paws scraping against a cluster of discarded cans and wrappers, fast food bags, recent, the kind from a quick stop. Eleanor knelt, gloved hand sifting through the debris. There, a scrap of fabric, blue and torn, matching the color of Tommy's jacket from yesterday's yard play. Her stomach knotted. Whoever took him wasn't random. This was deliberate, using the tunnel's isolation as cover. The old tracks led to a forgotten spur behind the mill, a no-man's land where vagrants sometimes squatted. But abductions. That crossed into federal territory, pulling in FBI if MPs confirmed it. "Rex, Platts," she commanded. "Down." He obeyed instantly, dropping to a stay, ears alert. She straightened, sweeping the light ahead. Faint voices drifted from around a bend, muffled by the drip of water, male, low and urgent, not the playful chatter of kids. Elena's pulse steadied. She unholstered her sidearm, grip firm. Safety off, but finger indexed along the frame. Military police training emphasized de-escalation first, force only as last resort. But here, alone, the rules blurred. She edged forward, hugging the wall, the cool concrete seeping through her uniform sleeve. The voices sharpened. "Kids out cold, dogs tied up back there. Boss said no traces." A pause, then a cough, the scrape of a boot. Elena's mind raced. Tommy drugged. The stray dog Lydia mentioned, caught in the crossfire. This smelled like trafficking, or worse, a grudge against the base spilling into civilian lives. Fort Harlan's proximity to the town had seen its share of tensions, protests over noise from training flights, whispers of resentment toward the military machine. But targeting a child, that defied every code she'd sworn to uphold. She rounded the bend cautiously, light dimmed to a red filter to preserve night vision. There, in a widened chamber where moonlight filtered through a cracked vent overhead, 2 figures huddled over a makeshift camp, tarps strung between rusted beams, a lantern casting harsh shadows. One man, wiry and hooded, rummaged through a duffel. The other, broader, paced with a radio of his own. Against the far wall, a small form slumped. Tommy, wrists bound with zip ties, head lolling. Nearby, the stray dog, a mangy mutt, whimpered softly, leashed to a pipe, its eyes wide with fear. Elena's breath caught, a surge of protective fury rising, tempered by discipline. She could call it in now, wait for the team to swarm. But the wiry one glanced up, spotting the glint of her light. "Who's there?" he snarled, hand dropping to his waistband. "No time! Federal agent, hands up!" Eleanor barked, stepping into view, weapon-trained center mass. Rex surged forward with a deep growl, leash straining, teeth bared. The men froze, then bolted, one toward a side passage, the other lunging for Tommy. "Rex, Fang!" Elena released the leash. The dog exploded into motion, tackling the broader man mid-stride, jaws clamping on his arm. A yelp echoed, followed by a thud as they hit the ground. Elena advanced, cuffing the fallen suspect with practiced efficiency, her knee pinning his back. "You're under arrest. Don't move." The wiry one vanished into the dark, footsteps fading. Elena secured Tommy next, slicing the ties with her knife, checking his pulse, steady, breathing shallow from whatever sedative they'd used. "Hang on, kid," she whispered, radioing it in fully now. "Control. Suspects down. One in custody. Child located. Medical needed stat. Second runner heading east spur." Sirens wailed distantly, growing louder, the base's response machinery grinding to life. But as she cradled Tommy's head, Rex returning to her side with a satisfied huff, the weight of her choices settled. She'd violated protocol, pursued without full backup, engaged without waiting. Captain Reed would demand a full report, the chain of command dissecting every second. Witnesses, Lydia, the neighbors, now these suspects. This wasn't contained. It was spilling into scrutiny. Her act of conscience a potential fracture in the institution's order. Outside, as MPs flooded the tunnel with lights and commands, Elena met Reed's gaze across the chaos. His face was stone, but his eyes held questions, admiration warring with the need for accountability. Rex leaned against her leg, wet fur brushing her pants, a silent anchor in the storm. The rescue was clean, but the reckoning had just begun, rippling through ranks and reputations alike. In saving one life, she'd tested the bonds that held them all. The floodlights pierced the tunnel's gloom like accusatory fingers, casting stark relief on the scene. Tommy bundled in a wool blanket, medics swarming with IV lines and vitals checks, the suspect cuffed and hooded, dragged toward an MP cruiser. The stray dog, trembling and muzzled, led away for quarantine. Elena stood at the edge of it all, Rex heeled tightly beside her, his flank still heaving from the takedown. The air hummed with radio chatter, coordinated, efficient, and the acrid bite of flashlight batteries mixing with the metallic tang of blood from the suspect's bitten arm. She wiped sweat from her brow, uniform damp against her skin, and met Captain Reed's approach with a salute, crisp despite the adrenaline ebb. "Vasquez," Reed said, voice low but edged with command's unyielding timbre. His eyes, shadowed under the brim of his cap, scanned her from boots to beret. "Debrief now." "Sir," she began, posture straight as the chain-link fences back at base. "Scent track led here. 2 suspects. One in custody, armed with zip ties and sedatives. Child secured, minor contusions. Second suspect fled east. Possible ties to the van Lydia Grant described." She kept it factual, procedural, omitting the gut twist of seeing Tommy's small frame slump against the wall. Rex shifted at her feet, sensing her tension, his nose nudging her boot in quiet reassurance. Reed nodded once, glancing at the medevac chopper's rotors whipping dust outside the entrance. "You went in solo. Radio logs show you held position at the mouth." It wasn't a question. The implication hung like the tunnel's damp fog. Protocol breached, judgment questioned. Elena held his gaze. "Initial track confirmed immediate threat, sir. Delay risked the child's safety. Rex's alert was positive on scent." Her words were measured, drawn from years of after-action reviews, but inside, the moral fault line widened. Duty demanded she follow the chain, secure, report, contain. Yet compassion had pulled her forward, the same instinct that made Rex her unwavering partner. Lydia's cry echoed in her mind, a civilian plea slicing through military barriers. Before Reed could press, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the battalion's XO, pushed through the cordon, tablet in hand, his face etched with the strain of coordinating from the command post. "Captain, media's already sniffing. Local news van at the access road. Neighbors are talking. Army dog saves kid from kidnappers. Vasquez, you're the handler." His tone carried the weight of institutional optics, eyes flicking to Rex, who sat alert. Ears perked toward the commotion. "Yes, sir." Elena replied, clipping Rex's leash shorter as an MP tech scanned him for injuries. The dog's fur was streaked with tunnel grime, wet and clinging, but his eyes remained steady, loyal. Hale tapped his screen. "We'll need your full statement for the report. JAG's looping in. FBI for the abduction angle. But this starts with us. You engaged without backup. That's a Article 92 potential. Failure to obey order or regulation." He paused, voice softening fractionally. "But the save's clean. Kid's stable, heading to the hospital with his mom." The words landed like boot heels on concrete, praise laced with peril. Elena felt the ripple, her actions, born of conscience, now under the microscope of the uniform code. Witnesses abounded. Lydia, the neighbors who'd seen Rex bolt, even the medics noting her solo entry. Fort Harlan's rumor mill would churn by reveille, whispers in the mess hall about the handler who defied protocol for a civilian. Back at base, under the harsh fluorescence of the MP headquarters, the interrogation room felt like an extension of the tunnel's chill. Elena sat across from Reed and Hale, recorder whirring, her report spilling out in precise detail, timestamps from her radio logs, Rex's behavioral cues, the scent trail's progression. At 072, Rex acquired target odor from the driveway, track velocity consistent with fresh trail, under 10 minutes old. She described the voices, the chamber, the takedown, her voice steady, but her fingers traced the edge of the table, betraying the tremor of vulnerability. Reed leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You knew the risks. Base policy, off-duty pursuits require coordinator approval. Why not wait?" Elena met his eyes, the room's air thick with the scent of stale coffee from a nearby pot. "Sir, the child was sedated alone. Waiting meant potential escalation, silence from the suspects or worse. It was the truth, unvarnished, morality overriding the rigid hierarchy that defined their world." Rex, kenneled outside, pawed faintly at the door, his whine a distant echo of their bond, the ultimate loyalty unburdened by ranks or reports. Hale interjected, scrolling logs. "Civilian statements corroborate. Mrs. Grant saw the van, heard the grab. Neighbors confirm your K9's response time. But the runner description matches a local with Pryor's anti-base agitator. This could tie to grudges from last year's protests." He closed the tablet. "Investigation's yours pending review, Vasquez. Stand by for tribunal if it escalates." As they dismissed her, Elena clipped Rex's lead in the holding area, his tail thumping once against the concrete floor. The base outside buzzed with subdued energy, soldiers glancing her way, salutes lingering a beat longer. Word had spread. The platoon sergeants murmured in clusters, respect mingling with caution. Her defiance wasn't hidden, it was public, a spark that could ignite reform or reprimand. In the quiet of the kennels that evening, as she brushed the mud from Rex's coat, the weight settled deeper. Lydia had called earlier, voice thick with gratitude. "You brought him back, Elena. That dog's a hero." But heroes in the ranks faced scrutiny, their choices dissected for lessons. Captain Reed's parting words replayed, "Integrity's our core, Vasquez." But so is the chain. The moral tension coiled tighter, her act of courage now a test for the institution itself, where loyalty to one could challenge the order of many. The next morning's formation carried an undercurrent, eyes on her as commands rang out. Reed's briefing was terse. Incident under review, focus on duty. Yet in the ranks, whispers of change stirred. Handlers discussing K9 protocols, the need for faster civilian response. Elena's choice had cracked the facade, forcing a reckoning that rippled beyond the tunnel's shadows. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The fluorescent hum of the briefing room at Fort Harlan pressed down like an invisible weight. the air conditioned to a sterile chill that did little to ease the knot in Elena's shoulders. She stood at ease before the assembled officers, her uniform pressed sharp, Rex seated motionless at her heel, his presence a quiet testament to the events of the previous day. Captain Reed occupied the head of the table, flanked by Lieutenant Hale and Major Ellis, the battalion commander, whose stern features betrayed no hint of sentiment. Maps of the local area sprawled across the surface, marked with red pins at the tunnel entrance, and Lydia Grant's address, while a projector cast grainy stills from body cams, Rex mid-tackle, Elena's flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Major Ellis began, his voice even, resonant with the authority of decades in uniform. "Your actions yesterday saved a civilian life. That's noted, but procedure exists for a reason. Walk us through your decision to enter the tunnel without full support." Eleanor nodded once, gaze fixed on the table's edge where her fingers rested lightly. "Sir, upon acquiring the scent at 0710 hours, Rex indicated a high-priority track. Civilian witness confirmed abduction details. White van, direction toward the old rail spur. Radio confirmation requested immediate response. I assessed the risk as imminent." She paused, the memory surfacing, the drip of water in the tunnel, Rex's low whine pulling her deeper. Protocol prioritizes life preservation. Delay could have resulted in escalation. Reed interjected, tapping a pen against his notepad. "Assessed how, exactly? Logs show your initial transmission as position secured at mouth. You advanced approximately 200 meters solo." His tone wasn't accusatory, but probing, the kind that peeled back layers in after-action sessions. Around the room, junior officers shifted subtly, notebooks open, the scent of fresh ink mingling with the faint polish of leather belts. "Visual confirmation of voices and movement, sir," Elena replied, her words clipped, professional. "No immediate backup ETA under 3 minutes. The child's age, 12, factored into threat level." Rex's ear twitched at her voice, a subtle acknowledgement, his bond with her woven into every choice. She'd trained him for obedience, but in that moment his instincts had mirrored her own buried resolve. Protect what mattered, chain of command be damned. Ellis leaned back, steepling his fingers. "And the engagement? K-9 release without handler cover. One suspect fled. That's a loose end." The room fell quieter, the only sound the soft click of a cooling fan. Elena felt the moral tension coil, her defiance praised in whispers by the platoon, yet here, under scrutiny, it exposed the fragility of institutional trust. Loyalty to Rex, to Tommy, had overridden the hierarchy, but now it invited judgment. Before she could respond, the door swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Sergeant Kira Novak, the unit's intel specialist, entered briskly, a tablet clutched under her arm. "Sirs, update from FBI liaison. The runners ID'd Darren Locke, local with a history of anti-military vandalism, ties to a fringe group protesting base expansions. The van was stolen. Sedatives match over-the-counter veterinary stock. Motive appears personal. Locke's brother was discharged last year. Claims of injustice." She slid the tablet forward. Photos flickering, Locke's mugshot, grainy surveillance from the mill. Reed studied the screen, brow furrowing. So this wasn't random. Spillover from civilian grievances. He glanced at Elena. "Your pursuit may have prevented worse, Vasquez, but it sets precedent. Handlers can't freelance off base." The words hung, a bridge between commendation and caution. Elena's mind raced to the broader ripple. If her actions inspired laxity, the chain weakened. If they highlighted gaps in protocol, reform might follow. Rex shifted, his nose brushing her calf, grounding her in their silent pact. The dog who sensed threats before orders could catch up. As the meeting adjourned, Hale pulled her aside in the corridor, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead. casting long shadows on the scuffed linoleum. Jags reviewing for formal inquiry. Keep it tight, no media chats. But the kid's mom, she's pushing for recognition, says Rex is the real hero. His voice carried a rare warmth, eyes flicking to the dog. You've got backing in the ranks, Elena. Just navigate the scrutiny. She saluted, the motion precise, but inside vulnerability stirred. Back at the kennels, the afternoon sun slanted through chain link, warming the concrete pads where other K9s paced their runs. Elena ran Rex through a standard obedience drill: heel, sit, down. His responses flawless, tail a steady metronome. The routine soothed, a reminder of the discipline that defined her, yet as she clipped his water bowl, her radio buzzed. Lydia Grant, requesting a visit at the hospital. The drive to the civilian medical center blurred past familiar streets, the base's perimeter fence giving way to suburban lawns dotted with children's bikes. Inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic clashed with the faint floral of get-well bouquets. Tommy lay propped in bed, color returning to his cheeks, an IV dripping steadily. Lydia rose from the bedside chair, enveloping Elena in a hug that breached uniform protocol, her eyes red-rimmed but grateful. "You did it," Lydia whispered, glancing at Rex, who sat politely, tail thumping once. "He woke up asking for that stray dog. The doctors say he'll be fine, no long-term effects." Elena nodded, hand resting on Rex's head. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But the words felt hollow. This was beyond duty, a human thread pulling at the military's rigid weave. Tommy grinned weakly from the bed, extending a bandaged hand. "Rex is awesome. He tackled the bad guy like in the movies." Laughter bubbled, lightening the room, but Elena saw the cost in Lydia's drawn face, the nights of fear, the breach of safety in their shared neighborhood. As she left, a cluster of reporters waited in the lobby, cameras poised, a local anchor thrusting a mic forward. "Sergeant, is it true your K9 partner saved this boy from kidnappers? What's the Army's stance on off-duty heroes?" Elena sidestepped, voice firm. "No comment. Refer to base public affairs." But the questions trailed her to the parking lot, flashes popping like distant gunfire. Word was spreading. Social media posts from neighbors, a viral clip of Rex bolting from the base. The public reckoning had ignited, her private choice now a spectacle, testing the institution's facade of control. Back at quarters that evening, Eleanor reviewed the day's logs by desk lamp, the soft glow illuminating stacks of certification papers. Rex curled at her feet, his breathing rhythmic, a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. Captain Reed's call came at 2000 hours. "Vasquez, press conference tomorrow. Battalions addressing the incident. Be prepared. Your testimony could shape policy on civilian integrations." She acknowledged, hanging up to the quiet whir of the fan. The defiance that started with a neighbor's cry was evolving, forcing the system to confront its boundaries. Loyalty to Rex, to the boy, had sparked a chain reaction: investigations, media glare, potential reforms in K9 response protocols. But integrity carried a price. The tribunal loomed, a formal test of where conscience ended and obedience began. In the dim light, Eleanor scratched Rex's ears, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering trust. The battle wasn't over. It was shifting from tunnel shadows to the bright scrutiny of the ranks, where one handler's stand could redefine the line between order and justice. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the base auditorium, casting striped shadows across the rows of folding chairs occupied by a mix of officers, enlisted personnel, and a handful of civilian liaisons. Elena adjusted her beret in the green room adjacent, the faint scent of industrial cleaner clinging to the air, mingling with the polish of her boots. Rex lay at her feet, his coat brushed to a shine, but his ears flicked toward the muffled voices beyond the door. Reporters, base public affairs officers, and the brass preparing their statements. Her radio sat silent on the table, a reminder of the chain that now scrutinized her every move. Captain Reed entered, his stride measured, uniform impeccable. "Vasquez, you're up after my intro. Keep it to facts, the track, the engagement, the outcome. No speculation on motives." His eyes held a flicker of solidarity, tempered by command's restraint. "Media's framing this as heroism, but JAG wants it procedural. The runner, Locke, is in custody. FBI's interrogating. Ties to that protest group are solidifying." Elena nodded, clipping Rex's lead. "Understood, sir." Inside, the tension coiled tighter. Her solo pursuit, once a gut instinct, now dissected in headlines scrolling across local news feeds. "Army K-9 handler defies orders to save boy," read one. Another speculated on internal conflicts at Fort Harlan. The public eye amplified the moral divide, duty to the boy versus the institution's protocols, turning her quiet defiance into a symbol that could either bolster or fracture trust in the ranks. The door opened to a hum of anticipation, cameras clicking as she led Rex into the glare of lights and microphones. Reed stood at the podium, his voice steady over the speakers. "The 47th Military Police Battalion responds swiftly to threats, on or off base. Staff Sergeant Vasquez's actions exemplify our commitment to community safety within the bounds of procedure." He stepped aside, gesturing her forward. Elena approached, Rex heeling perfectly, his presence drawing murmurs from the crowd. She faced the array of lenses, the heat from the spots warming her face, and began, "At 07:05 hours, during routine formation, a civilian distress call was reported. My K-9 partner, Rex, acquired the scent trail from the scene. We tracked to the old rail tunnel, where 2 suspects were located with the abducted child." Her tone remained even, hands clasped behind her back. But she felt the weight of unspoken judgments, the way her advance without backup now fueled debates on handler autonomy. Questions erupted immediately. A reporter from the town paper leaned in. "Sergeant, reports say you entered alone against protocol. Was this a deliberate choice to prioritize the child over orders?" Elena paused, Rex's steady breathing a grounding rhythm at her side. "All actions were guided by training and immediate assessment. Life preservation is paramount." The answer skirted the edge, her conscience whispering the truth. Yes, deliberate, born of the human pull to act when seconds counted. Flashes popped, capturing the moment, and she glimpsed Lieutenant Hale in the back row, nodding subtly. Another voice cut through. "How does the Army justify K-9 deployments in civilian areas? Is this a sign of lax oversight at the base?" Reed interjected from the side, fielding it smoothly, but the damage lingered, the query echoing the institutional undercurrents, where her choice exposed gaps in off-base response guidelines. As the conference wrapped, Elena led Rex out through a side exit, the cool corridor air a relief, but her radio crackled. "Vasquez, report to JAG offices. Tribunal prep starts now." The JAG conference room was a stark contrast to the auditorium's glare, dimly lit, walls lined with case files, the air carrying the musty trace of old paper and cooling vents. Major Ellis presided at the head, joined by a panel of 2 colonels and a legal advisor, their expressions neutral masks of procedure. Elena stood at attention, Rex permitted at her side under handler protocol, his nose twitching at the unfamiliar sense. "Staff Sergeant," Ellis opened, sliding a folder forward. "This informal inquiry assesses potential violations under UCMJ Article 92, dereliction of duty. Your radio logs indicate deviation from standard pursuit protocols. Explain." Eleanor met his gaze, posture unyielding. "Sir, the scent acquisition indicated a time-sensitive threat. Civilian witness corroborated abduction details, and Rex's behavioral signals confirmed active pursuit. I balanced operational security with humanitarian imperative." Her words flowed from rote training, but emotion threaded through. the tremor in her voice when recalling Tommy's bound form, the way Rex's growl had bridged the gap between order and instinct. One colonel, a wiry veteran with deployment ribbons gleaming, leaned forward. Balanced how? Backup was en route. Solo entry risked handler safety and canine asset integrity. Precedent could encourage unchecked actions. The room's silence amplified the tick of a wall clock. Eleanor feeling the ripple, her stand not just personal, but a test for the battalion's K9 program, loyalty to Rex, forged in silent drills under desert suns, now under fire. Had she endangered him by unleashing without cover? Rex shifted, leaning into her leg, his warmth a subtle gesture of trust amid the scrutiny. Ellis reviewed notes, then addressed the panel. FBI brief. Locke's group targeted the child to draw base attention. Protest escalation. Vasquez's intervention disrupted it cleanly. One suspect apprehended on site. He paused, eyes on Elena. Commendable outcome, but procedure safeguards the mission. Your input on protocol gaps. It was an opening, subtle, inviting reform. Sir, current guidelines undervalue rapid K9 response in hybrid zones, base-adjacent civilians. Integrated training with local PD could mitigate solo risks. Her suggestion hung, born of vulnerability. The fear of losing Rex in that tunnel or failing Tommy due to red tape. The panel murmured, notes scribbled, the air thick with the scent of ballpoint ink. As they recessed, Hale pulled her aside in the hallway, linoleum echoing their steps. They're leaning toward reprimand on paper, counseling, not court-martial, but your testimony's shifting things. Handlers are petitioning for updated ROE on civilian tracks. Elena exhaled, clipping Rex's lead tighter. Outside, the parade ground stirred with afternoon drills, boots thudding in unison, the distant whir of a Black Hawk on approach. The public reckoning pressed on, media clips circulating, neighbors like Lydia voicing support in interviews, her voice cracking over airwaves. That dog and his handler, their family now. The institution responded not with punishment alone, but adaptation, Eleanor's conscience sparking quiet changes in the chain. That evening, in the kennel's soft glow of sodium lamps, she ran Rex through a scent drill, his nose working the air with unerring focus. The routine anchored her, wet fur brushing her hands as she praised him softly. Gut, Rex. Yet the tribunal loomed larger, a formal hearing set for week's end, where witnesses would testify, Lydia's tearful account, MP's logs, even Tommy's drawing of Rex as a caped savior. Her defiance, once a bolt into darkness, now illuminated the system's flaws, forcing a legacy of reform where moral courage tempered rigid order. As stars pricked the night sky beyond the wire, Elena sat on the concrete stoop, Rex's head in her lap, the faint radio static from patrols a lullaby. The cost of integrity weighed heavy, scrutiny on her career, whispers in the mess about the tunnel handler. But in his steady gaze, she saw redemption's seed, a bond unbreakable, rippling toward justice beyond the ranks. The dim hum of the JAG hearing room at Fort Harlan carried the weight of finality, its paneled walls absorbing the low murmur of assembled personnel like echoes in a briefing tent. Elena stood at parade rest before the tribunal panel, her boots aligned precisely on the worn carpet, the faint scent of oiled wood and fresh briefing packets grounding her amid the scrutiny. Rex sat rigidly at her side, his black and tan coat impeccable, ears attuned to the subtle shifts in the room, Colonel Ramirez presiding at center, flanked by two majors and a legal recorder, their uniforms a sea of subdued olive and brass. Outside the reinforced windows, the base stirred under a slate-grey dawn, the distant thump of rotor blades from a morning patrol slicing the air. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Colonel Ramirez intoned, his voice steady as a radio dispatch, flipping through the bound report. This tribunal convenes under UCMJ Article 92 to evaluate your actions during the civilian abduction incident on 14th October. Witnesses, including Mrs. Lydia Grant and the recovered juvenile, have testified to the efficacy of your response. However, deviation from protocol, solo entry and K9 engagement without coordinator clearance warrants examination. State your defense. Elena met his gaze evenly, her posture a pillar of discipline forged in years of formations and field exercises. Sir, my decisions were informed by immediate threat assessment. Rex's scent acquisition at the civilian residence indicated a volatile situation. Sedation confirmed on site. Suspects armed. Training under FM 319. 17 emphasizes handler discretion in life-threatening scenarios adjacent to installation boundaries. She kept her tone procedural, words drawn from doctrine, but felt the undercurrent of vulnerability. The tribunal wasn't just judging her. It probed the institution's own seams where rigid chains met human imperatives. Major Ellis, from the battalion command, leaned forward, his deployment chevrons catching the overhead light. Discretion, yes, but your radio log shows affirmative hold order at 0715. Advancing 200 meters exposed assets, yourself, the K9, and responding units, to unnecessary risk. How does one justify prioritizing individual conscience over chain integrity? The question landed like a withheld command, the room's air thickening with the faint click of the recorder. Elena's hand rested lightly on Rex's collar, feeling the steady rise of his chest, a silent bond that had carried them through the tunnel's chill, now on trial. Sir, the chain exists to protect, not paralyze. Delay equated to potential harm. The juvenile's vitals were compromised per medical report. Rex's alert, whine and velocity increase signaled active peril. I balanced operational doctrine with the oath to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Her response echoed the moral tension that had defined her path, obedience as shield, but compassion as the blade that cut through red tape. Testimony unfolded methodically. Lydia Grant took the stand first, her civilian attire a stark contrast to the uniforms, voice trembling yet resolute as she described the van's screech and Tommy's cry. I saw them grab him, the dog too, then Rex. He just knew. Elena didn't hesitate. She acted like family would. The panel nodded, notes scribbled, the scent of her floral perfume lingering briefly. Next, young Tommy, cleared for brief appearance, clutched a sketch pad with a drawing of Rex mid-leap. She saved me, sirs. The bad guys had needles and stuff. Rex bit the one trying to run away with me. His words, innocent and direct, drew a subtle shift in the room, human emotion piercing the procedural veil. MP witnesses followed. Lieutenant Hale detailing the response timeline. His voice clipped over radio logs played back, crackles of suspect down, child secure. The runner, Darren Locke, had confessed under FBI questioning, his group's grudge against the base spilling into the abduction as a twisted statement. Targeted the kid to hit close to home, Hale summarized. Vasquez's intervention netted evidence, stolen van plates, protest manifestos that's tying up loose ends. As the hearing recessed for deliberation, Elena led Rex into the adjacent holding area, the door sealing with a soft pneumatic sigh. The space was sparse, metal benches, a water bowl for working dogs, the air carrying the faint dampness from an overnight rain. She knelt, running a gloved hand along his flank, feeling the warmth of fur still carrying traces of tunnel grit despite the baths. "Gut boy," she murmured, his tail thumping once against the tile. In this quiet, the cost surfaced. Sleep evaded her since the incident. Dreams replaying the scuffle, the weight of potential reprimand on her record. Demotion, reassignment, the fracture of her handler certification. Ramirez reconvened the panel an hour later, the room settling into expectant silence. After review of evidence, doctrine and testimony, he announced, the tribunal finds no willful dereliction. Actions deemed justified under exigent circumstances per AR 190-14 on military police operations. Recommendation. Formal commendation for Staff Sergeant Vasquez and her K-9 partner Rex. Further, initiate protocol review for K-9 civilian interface. Propose joint exercises with local authorities to bridge response gaps. Relief washed through Elena. Tempered by restraint, she saluted sharply, the motion echoing in the chamber, but the verdict's ripple extended beyond her. Whispers in the corridor spoke of battalion-wide briefings, handlers like her advocating for updated ROE, rules of engagement that honored instinct without inviting chaos. Major Ellis approached post-hearing, his nod carrying rare approval. You walk the line, Vasquez. This sets a marker, conscience in the chain, not against it. The afternoon brought formalities. A commendation ceremony in the parade ground, sun breaking through clouds to glint off medals pinned to her chest, a silver star for valor. Rex awarded a ceremonial collar etched with Tunnel Guardian. The platoon stood in ranks, boots aligned on gravel still damp from the rain, salutes held a fraction longer as Reed pinned the honors. Lydia and Tommy watched from the sidelines. The boy's grin wide, the stray dog, now dubbed Scout, quarantined but safe at a local shelter, yet redemption wasn't solitary. In the kennels that evening, as Elena logged the day's entries under the hum of fluorescent strips, Sergeant Novak joined her, tablet in hand. Policy drafts circulating, mandatory cross-training with Town PD for hybrid threats. Your input's key. Handlers are citing the tunnel as case study. The reform stirred quietly, actions once defiant now seeding institutional evolution. Loyalty not just to orders, but to the lives they shielded. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the runs, Elena walked Rex along the perimeter fence, the wire humming faintly under floodlights. The base's rhythm resumed, patrols rolling out, radio chatter steady, but her stand had etched a legacy, a testament to moral courage amid hierarchy's press. The neighbor's cry that started it all had transformed into a bridge, where human vulnerability met disciplined resolve, ensuring the chain bent toward justice rather than break. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The weeks following the tribunal unfolded like a well-executed patrol, methodical, with each step building on the last. The base's rhythm adapting to the subtle shifts Elena's actions had provoked. Fort Harlan's morning formations carried a new undercurrent. Handlers like her exchanging nods across the gravel, their K-9 partners healing with renewed precision. The air still held the crisp bite of autumn, dew glistening on tent flaps and the faint rumble of Humvees rolling out for routine checks. But in the command post briefings, maps now included civilian overlays, neighborhood grids marked with response vectors, a direct nod to the tunnel incident. Elena stood in the expanded K-9 training yard one crisp dawn, the chain-link fence rattling softly in the wind as she oversaw the first joint session with the local police department. Rex sat at her side, his gaze fixed on the scattering of officers and their working dogs, noses twitching in unison toward hidden scent canisters buried in the simulated urban debris. "Pair up!" she called, voice carrying the steady cadence of a handler's command. Focus on transition zones, base edge to civilian streets. Rex, Voran. He moved forward, quartering the ground with effortless focus, drawing admiring glances from the PD trainers. Lieutenant Hale observed from the sidelines, arms crossed, his tablet displaying the draft policy revisions. "Vasquez, this is your blueprint. Integrated protocols. Handlers get cross-cert for off-base tracks, with PD liaisons on speed dial. No more solo bolts." His tone held approval, the institutional machine bending without breaking. Reform sparked by her defiance, now formalized in memos and training modules. The session progressed under the rising sun, dogs whining in sync, officers radioing mock coordinates, the hum of collaboration replacing isolation. By midday, as the group broke for debrief, Captain Reed approached, his boots crunching over the trampled grass. FBI closed the book on lock. Groups disbanded, charges sticking. Your testimony sealed it. He paused, glancing at Rex, who leaned into Elena's leg with a soft huff. Battalion's nominating you for instructor duty. Mentor the next wave on ethical discretion. The chain learns from stands like yours. Elena saluted, the motion fluid, her chest tightening with the quiet weight of legacy. Thank you, sir. Rex and I are ready. It was transformation embodied. From scrutinized handler to symbol, her moral choice rippling into mentorship. No fanfare, just the steady grind of progress. Handlers now drilled on conscience corridors, balancing orders with the human edge that K9s embodied. That afternoon, Eleanor drove to the hospital outskirts, where Lydia had invited her for Tommy's discharge. The civilian medical center's parking lot bustled with families, the scent of exhaust mingling with autumn leaves skittering across asphalt. Inside, the corridor hummed with beeps and footsteps, antiseptic sharp in the air. Tommy bounded from his room, bandaged arm in a sling, Scout, the stray mutt, freshly vetted and collared, trotting at his heels on a leash Lydia had fashioned from an old belt. "Elena, look! Scout's coming home with us." The boy's eyes lit up, fist-bumping Rex, who tolerated it with a tolerant sniff. Lydia enveloped her in another hug, brief but firm. The doctors cleared him fully. No scars, thanks to you too. Her voice carried gratitude laced with resolve. She'd started a neighborhood watch, flyers posted on lampposts, echoing the base's vigilance. As they walked the grounds, Tommy tossing a tennis ball for the dogs under watchful eyes, Elena felt the broader consequence settle. Her pursuit had bridged worlds, military precision meeting civilian fragility, sparking not just policy tweaks, but community ties. Local PD Chief Harlan, a grizzled veteran with a firm handshake, joined them briefly. "Your protocol's influencing our end, Sergeant. Joint ops starting next month. That tunnel's off limits now. Barriers up, patrols shared." The exchange was professional, short, but it underscored the reform. Actions once defiant, now woven into the system's fabric, ensuring no child slipped through cracks again. Elena clipped Rex's lead, watching him play gently with Scout, their tails wagging in tandem, a silent metaphor for loyalty transcending boundaries. Back at base that evening, the mess hall buzzed with subdued energy, trays clattering and low conversations threading through the steam of chow lines. Elena sat with her platoon, the silver star pinned discreetly under her jacket as Sergeant Novak slid into the seat across. "Word from JAG. Your case studies in the manual. Vasquez Protocol, discretion in exigent civilian threats." She grinned faintly, fork pausing mid-air. "Handlers are calling it the Rex rule. Keeps the conscience sharp without fraying the chain." Laughter rippled softly, respectful, the group's eyes holding a new respect. Elena's vulnerability, once exposed in the tribunal's glare, now a strength that mentored them all. She nodded, savoring the simple meal, the taste of institutional justice emerging through discipline's restraint. As night fell, Elena led Rex through the kennel's quiet rows, the sodium lamps casting warm pools on concrete. Other handlers brushed their partners, murmurs of gut hund floating in the air, a ritual enriched by her legacy. In the handler's lounge, a bulletin board now featured the commendation photo, her and Rex, tunnel shadows behind them, captioned with a directive, "Honor in action, duty meets conscience." She settled on a bench, Rex curling beside her, his head on her knee, the faint jingle of his tags a comforting rhythm. The cost of integrity lingered, the sleepless nights, the dissected reports, but it had forged something enduring, a system that learned, bending toward compassion without losing its spine. Elena's hand traced his ears, the bond a quiet anchor, as distant patrols hummed beyond the wire. In the months that followed, Fort Harlan's protocols evolved quietly, joint exercises becoming routine, handlers like Elena leading drills that wove military order with civilian safeguards. Tommy visited the base once, under escort, tossing treats to Rex amid awed recruits, his presence a living emblem of the lives protected. Lydia's neighborhood watch partnered with MP Community Outreach, fences no longer barriers, but bridges. Elena's career shifted seamlessly, instructor by day, her lessons on moral tension drawing from the tunnel's echo, when to hold the line, when to advance. Recruits saluted with lingering holds, inspired by the handler who'd chosen right over rote. The institution, once rigid, now flexed with earned wisdom, her defiance a catalyst for reform that honored loyalty in all its forms. Under a starlit sky, as Elena walked the perimeter with Rex, the desert wind whispering through the wire, she felt the transformation complete. One act of conscience had etched a legacy of quiet strength, where soldiers and their partners stood as guardians not just of orders, but of the fragile trust that bound them all. In the end, discipline proved the truest loyalty, turning shadows into light for those who followed. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of Someone Took Him, the neighbor cried, and the K9 bolted toward an old train tunnel. See you in the next one.